All right, we're ready on to our final talk, contributed talk, and talk of today. And so, thank you very much for joining us, Pat. And Pat will talk about creativity as a human virtue.
Yep.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I'm going to go ahead and apologize in advance if I go a few minutes over. I really love the sound of my own voice, so I might go slow. All right. Good. So my name is Pat Hayes. I'm from the University of Glasgow, where my doctoral research focuses on aesthetic virtues and vices, habits, characteristics, and attitudes which positively and negatively impact people's ability to perform aesthetic actions like creation, like appreciation, engagement, stuff like that. And so I'm here today to talk about creativity, and specifically what makes creativity a human virtue, and how it is only fittingly attributed to human agents. So here's the general overview of the talk. So first, we're going to look at what do we mean by creativity. I'll present sort of two definitions. And then we'll look at sort of the question of when someone is creative, following sort of Zebsky's exemplarist route, sort of hammer home our idea of creativity. And then I'll go into what makes creativity a distinctly human virtue. And then finally, I'll go on to sort of extending the logical conclusions of creativity being a human virtue to say a couple of things about artistic achievement and art being distinctively human. So from the literature, it seems like there are a lot of definitions of creativity, but the two main ones that I found are this technical creativity and then an aesthetic or artistic creativity. So with technical creativity, we might think of creative problem solutions, ingenuity, producing these new ideas, new perspectives, adding to discussion. You put something into ChatGPT, you get this result, and it gives you sort of new information combining existing information that you have. And then there's this second kind, aesthetic or artistic creativity, which is separated by sort of the norms and expectations around it and when we attribute it. And it's characterized more by imaginativeness, as we've heard about already, expressiveness, and this ability to make distinctly novel, positively valenced, experientially rich. That's my way of saying beautiful because I'm too deep in the literature. Rich objects or performances. So it'll come as no surprise to folks that I'm interested in this latter kind of creativity. I'm not going to say much about this technical creativity. I will remain sort of mute on it. I think it is possible. I could see arguments for it. I'm not going to go into great detail about it, but I think if folks want to take the things that I'm saying and apply them to the epistemic domain, perfectly fine and possible. So when is someone creative? So let's consider some cases. So we have a master forger. They've studied all the greats, they've learned every technique possible, and they can imitate the artists that they're trying to imitate perfectly, or near perfectly. And then you have a traditional gospel singer. That's the kind of traditional performer that I'm familiar with. But you can put in sort of different traditions if you'd like. And then you have a glass blower. They go out, work at farmers markets, they take glass, make their own designs. They can take influences here and there. But they're making their own sort of product and that sort. So what do intuitions typically say about this? Well, we'd say a master forger is not being creative. Why? Because, as I said before, they're not doing something novel. They're sort of lacking this originality. Meanwhile, with the traditional gospel singer, there might be some minimal amount of creativity or something along those lines, but typically we wouldn't attribute to them creative work. Rather, they're doing sort of the same material over and over again for their parishioners. Meanwhile, it seems like quite straightforward for us that a glass blower is creating original work, is being motivated to design new things, is exploring new ideas. It seems like they are an exemplar of creativity. So with creativity and with art making and that sort, we can consider yeah, what if this master forger who has all these techniques and knows all these practices and that sort, then begins to make original work? Will we consider their work creative? Will we consider them artistic achievements? Will we consider it art? Well, yeah, what would change? So these are my intuitions, that their work, when they were original, would be considered art, or depending on their development, they would at least be an artistic achievement. They would possess and act on this virtue of creativity that I discussed, and their technical skills would gain artistic and aesthetic value as they sort of share in the value of this art or artistic achievement that they're making. So why is this? So some people working in like aesthetic virtue space want to say that it comes down to the aesthetic virtues that this forger turned artist is using. And I think that's partially right. I think that's part of the story that we want to tell. But when we're thinking about this question of creativity and the virtues and art making and how these virtues relate to art or artistic achievement, we need to go a little bit deeper than just the aesthetic virtues. And why is this? Well, if we go back to the case of the traditional gospel singer, we can see, oh hey, they have a different constellation of aesthetic virtues compared to a glassblower and compared to a forger. They aren't, or a forger turned artist, they aren't exhibiting creativity, but nevertheless, we consider their work to be art. So then the question becomes, well, which virtues need to be present for us to consider the work of a particular artist to be art or an artistic achievement? You could say, well, you don't need any in particular, you just need some. But then the question becomes how many? Because it seems inappropriate to say that just someone who's courageous, willing to present their work, willing to create, to say that their product, that the end product of their creation would be an artistic achievement or art. You know, you go to a park and that sort, and you hear some folks singing or playing an instrument and that sort. You wouldn't, you know, they're aesthetically courageous in their willingness to share, but we wouldn't ascribe to their practice creativity or sort of art achievement making. So what I want to do, and this is part of a larger article that I'm working on, aesthetic roles, is to say that while the forger is also, you know, taking on is possessing and acting on new virtues, they're also inhabiting new social roles. And those roles are aesthetic in nature because they are standing in a positive relation to an existing or possible aesthetic good. So this is a lot of text. If you want to read it long, you can, but I'll just explain it. So what is a role? It's this social concept that we can inhabit at a given time. We become familiar with these through culturation, through familiarization, and we form norms and expectations of what it means to be excellent in those roles, what it means to have virtuous action in those roles. And an agent may inhabit these roles by pursuing action or giving attention to the target of excellence given to them by that role. And what is the target of excellence? Well, it's a virtuous mean between two less vicious actions. More vicious actions. So, for example, say you were born in or raised in the early 2000s America. You're familiar with this idea of a hip-hop artist. You will pick out exemplars, MF Doom, 50 Cent, just to name a few. And within that, you will have expectations You'll form norms about what excellent action looks like for that kind of creator and that particular time and space. And so if you were then to go and become and create, if you were to become a hip-hop artist, you would have targets of excellent action given to you, and those targets of excellent action would be art or would be artistic achievement for you. All right. So what do we have to say about, excuse me. So take this framework and going back, we can, due to time restraints, I might limit this. But yeah, if we go back, we can see a master forger is in a non-aesthetic role. They're in a role of maker. They don't have a target of aesthetic excellence. They're not standing in a pro or positive relationship with a future aesthetic good. Rather, they're imitating. And we can see technical excellence and their ability to perform that role of forger, but we wouldn't ascribe to them an aesthetic excellence. Meanwhile, with a traditional gospel singer, they would have a target of excellence. They might not exhibit the virtue of creativity, but if they succeeded at hitting this traditional role by exercising aesthetic character virtues, like generosity, aesthetic patience, stuff like that, as well as aesthetic faculties like perfect pitch and all that, then they would be hitting the target of excellence and we would recognize their work as an artistic achievement or art. And similarly with a glassblower, I don't need to get into too much detail there. So yeah, I've said a lot about this framework. So what can we say about creativity in this context and what does it mean for AI? So within these roles, creativity acts as a character virtue that enables agents to identify and hit novel targets of excellent or virtuous aesthetic action in roles that require creativity. So it's fitting for agents inhabiting these social roles and acting on and hitting the targets of excellence picked out by the roles. And it seems unfitting for agents who can inhabit, embody, sort of have like felt knowledge and form expectations of their own, be presented with virtuous actions of their own, or be embedded in particular societies and histories. And so AI cannot embody or inhabit a social role. It's asocial in the sense that it does not come from a particular place. It does not form expectations of a particular time on its own. It is not producing uniquely to its own agency these sort of expectations. And so it seems like creativity is wrongly attributed in the aesthetic sense to AI as it lacks this social component. And then I think that this also applies to some but not all animals. I can go, I've got a lot of opinions about animals making art, but I can save that for another time. And so then what can we say about AI art or artistic achievement, given what we said about creativity? So I want to say that artistic achievement is distinctively human. So it's a target of excellence. It's a target of virtuous action, which is shaped by a particular aesthetic role. And I've focused mainly here on creation, but if we go back to the idea of appreciation and looking at that dog that could analyze, you're given other aesthetic roles, such as an appreciator, and the norms around those are shaped and formed and given to particular human agents located in particular socio-historical contexts. And so, yeah, that achievement and the norms and expectations surrounding it are indexed to and dependent on a particular agent and an aesthetic role, the time that they live, how they inhabit it, their own development. And as I said, AI cannot embody or inhabit a role, and the images that it generates are and could never be an artistic achievement, although it might be seen as sort of a technical success. With that said, given this framework, I do leave room for AI being used as a tool that could result in artistic achievement. I think that's perfectly fine. Whether it would be seen as sort of a great achievement or a good art, I think will depend largely on the amount of involvement people have in fine-tuning the AI and exactly how it's used. And so that's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have time for a couple of questions before we go into the panel discussion, and we'll start right here with Matteo, and then I'll come down to you.
Thank you very much for this talk. I think this is a general question that maybe is addressed also to other talks, and maybe I missed the point completely, but I'm a theoretical physicist, and we associate also creativity, we may associate creativity with the fact of creating something, creating an object, an idea, generally a theory, that is more deep than other theories, and that in some sense describes many more phenomena. And to some extent, so this is also my naive experience when I look at Picasso with a figure of a woman with an eye on this side and eye on the other side. But essentially, it captures a set of emotional states in a very essential manner. So. Yeah. So this is not combinatorial creativity. It's not, but it is a virtue. It is virtuous in the sense that it unearths something which is there, okay, which can be appreciated by everyone, okay. So I don't know how much this, and I mean, there are also people that argue that this type of creativity has a moral, say, connotation to it, yeah, in the sense that it enforces a moral behavior in some sense on physicists. Like, oh, yeah. And but I was wondering how much this idea of creativity aligns, and this virtue aligns with what you were talking about.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. Yeah, no, so a component of creativity is, I believe, expressiveness is the general idea. It's expressing this idea, it's expressing these emotional states and that sort. And it seems like AI would also just not have access to those emotional states. Yeah, that totally jives with what I was saying. I think that's another way of combating the idea that AI can be creative. I think I could probably stretch what it means to like embody a role, because you form certain associations and like with the role and with the ideas and how to express emotions and which emotions are worth expressing and that sort. That would be tied into embodying and being embedded in a role. I think I could add that, give it a bit of nuance, bit of flair, you know, make it, yeah, sell it well. I think that would work perfectly fine. Yeah, thank you for the question, comment. I appreciate it.
We have another question here at the back.
Thanks, that was a great talk. I was wondering, how do you fit or reconcile like deception with your framework? So for example, let's say somebody reads a book, they love the book, it's fantastic, and then they find out that the book was actually written by AI, and now they hate the book. They feel like they were catfished or they were deceived. Yeah. But then their friend who also read the book finds out it was written by AI, and they still love the book. It still made them laugh. It still made them cry. How does your framework deal with those stress cases where you have to explain why one person hated it after learning that it was a fake and the other one still appreciated it? Where does that fit in?
Okay, so that's a really interesting case. So within my own work, I take it for granted that people, when they realize the origin of a work, would immediately just disappreciate it. But there might be cases where people wouldn't. You know, I think that you might have that case of a friend. And in cases like that, I'd say it depends on the import that they're personally bringing and their own sort of metric. So if a person is just valuing the effective content, you know, what it generates in me and that sort, then yeah, it seems like that's perfectly fine for you to continue to engage with the effective content, like the emotional content of it. But if someone's evaluating it on the cognitive content and evaluating like the originality of the ideas in it, and then realizes that, oh, this is written by AI, then it seems like it would make sense for them to reject it. The beautiful thing with aesthetic value is that you appreciate both. And, you know, I think you could say to your friend, well, you're reading AI-generated slop, and you're not acting as like a real aesthetic agent. You're being a sentimentalist, or something along those lines. I don't know. That's quite cynical and negative, and not the way that I would speak to a friend, but someone could say something like that. Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
We have one last question.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. This was very interesting. I'm not familiar with this framework of virtue aesthetics. So is a clarification question hidden under maybe a critical remark? If I understood you correctly, you say that in order to be an artist, you must mean to do art. You must, so to say, the intention to do art must be into it in a way. Am I correct?
So the degree of intentionality, I'm still figuring out. I think you can, and I talk about this in the paper, I think you cannot know that you're making art, but then retroactively recognize that, this is what I was doing. So you can have intentionality like going into it, or retroactively. So the example that I use, I don't know why I'm standing. The example that I use is this origami savant with amnesia, and they absent-mindedly fold 1,000 cranes. And then like we look back on their work and we realize, oh, hey, this person, you know, was clearly inhabiting a role of maker. Like they were exemplifying faculty virtues by being able to fold so delicately and that sort, and like they chose these colors that, you know, worked well with one another. So I don't think you have to be entirely intentional going into it. I think you can accidentally fall into an aesthetic role as well. I think that's how we get around problems of like first art and stuff like that, of people like, there's no like social concept or idea of what it means to be an artist, but nevertheless we look back at cave paintings and we're like, these folks were artists. So I think, yeah, something along those lines. Sorry if I went into way too much detail.
No, don't worry. It makes it even more interesting because, I mean, if inhabiting a social role is not something that you have to want to do or even to realize you're doing, so if, so to say, the intention to do it and the knowledge of doing it is not necessary, then maybe AI comes back into the game. So maybe that plays against your whole premise. But I mean, that's just, I mean, a provocation. It's, that's the issue I was thinking about, so to say. Because otherwise, the other way around is you cut off a big chunk of the history of art. So to say, that really reduces art to a very romantic, historically speaking, conception of what art is as a social practice. That was my problem, but it was absolutely interesting.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Cheers.
All right, thank you to all the three speakers, again, of this session.